earth. I want to deal today, we've been dealing the last couple of days with that conversational God, how God speaks to us and we wrestle out concepts. I'm not going to try to review 2 nights worth of material, but just to get you up to speed a little bit is just to understand that God is always asking us questions. God is always listening to our appeal. God is always probing. God is inviting us to wrestle with Him. God invites them in the Old Testament. I mean, Jacob wrestles with God and becomes the man who contends with God. His name becomes Israel, he who contends with God. God invites them in the book of Isaiah to argue with Him and state their case before Him. And God shows us the release from our sins so that we're free from guilt. And we wrestle out big concepts with God. Jesus is about His Father's business in Luke 2. He's asking questions and He's listening. I took you last night back into the garden where God shows up and Adam and Eve have sinned. And God begins to ask a series of questions to Adam and Eve and how those questions probe the heart of man. And they force us to ask, hey, where am I? Who told me this about myself? Who told me that I was naked? What is it that I've done in this situation? And owning it and understanding it. I want to take you to the encounter that God has with Cain today. And I think this is miraculously fitting because I want to take you to a spot where Adam and Eve are really you dealing with the inner relationship because Eve's a part of Adam. So you have to ask yourself, the questions that gets asked of Adam and Eve are sort of the internal questions that gets asked of us. The questions that get asked of Cain are questions of someone dealing with someone else. And here we are in a world where we're dealing with someone else. And the amazing thing is the first question God asks Cain is question asked of a man on the precipice of disaster. He has not yet killed his brother, but he's angry and he's emotional. He's on the precipice of passing the point of no return when God steps in to have him question his emotional state so that he can ask the questions that are most important. And as I was thinking that over today, it didn't really hit me because we had led these messages up to this point, but not on purpose. I was going to preach this Friday night. I mean, I really was so ambitious. I thought I'll preach all those questions the first night, and we'll just see what happens. And little did I know that I had a whole lot more to say. And so here we are 3 services in, and I go, wow, it's incredible that in the condition of the world outside of the walls, which we can't help but pull into here if we're human. That's just life. And then we're dragging those those thoughts and those concerns and those pains and those emotions into the house this morning. It's fitting to go look at a young man who's facing his emotions right on the edge of doing something he can't come back from, and how we are very similar, dealing with those emotions right on the edge of something we can't come back from, and maybe we need to take a look. So go with me to Genesis chapter 4, as we're in the first book of the Bible, and you know the story of Adam and Eve. I'll not rehash the entire eating of the fruit, but I want us to go to that moment in verse 1, and we're going to introduce those 2 characters of Cain and Abel, not really so much preaching their encounter with one another as we want to deal today with the question God asked Cain, which is, why are you angry? Let's read some context. Verse 1, Adam knew Eve his wife, and she conceived and bore Cain, and said, I have acquired a man from the Lord. And she bore again, this time his brother Abel. Now Abel was a keeper of sheep, and Cain was a tiller of the ground. The Bible introduces you to the first shepherd and the first farmer. And the first shepherd is going to meet a tragic death. Jesus will come along as the good shepherd and meet an equally tragic death. The first shepherd will die at the hands of his brother. The second shepherd will die at the hands of his brethren. And the blood of Abel will scream for revenge in the family of man, and the blood of Jesus will scream avenged in the family of man. And we can live from the victim of Abel, and we will always have vengeance in our heart, or we can live from the victim Jesus, and we will always have the potential for victory from a place of crucifixion, because Abel does not raise from the dead, but Jesus raises from the dead. So where the first shepherd meets his death and dies and is swallowed up by the earth, the last shepherd meets his death and comes out of the earth so that we can be better than the first father. And so these stories of Genesis, they have so many layers that you can peel back and watch how the Bible unfolds from these moments, and the whole story, really the entire story, takes off out of these moments. In the process of time, it came to pass, that's actually a very interesting phrase. I didn't mean to do this, but this is my habit when I start reading, because I start breaking them down too much. There's actually an interesting phrase in the Hebrew, because it's literally at the end of days. It came to pass that Cain brought an offering. And so the end of days is not simply the end of the world. The end of days is the end of an era. And in some ways, we are living through an end of days. Now, my eschatology is not there's a bunch of hell coming in the future and we just can't wait to get out of here. I really believe that most of what the Bible talks about as the end of days is in your past, not your future. But I don't want to discount the fact that we do encounter various ends of days where something we've been accustomed to dies and never lives again. And it's possible that we've entered an end of days. And that doesn't mean end of the world. But it's possible we've entered the end of an era. We might have even entered a new era and don't even realize we're out of the old one. That's typically what happens, is you don't realize that things are never going to be the same again. And when those end of days moments happen, we become very attached to our emotions. Our emotions come to the forefront. That's why I believe we're in an end of the era event. Not the end of the world, but the end of an era event, because our emotions are coming very much to the surface. So in the end of days, or in the process of time, it came to pass that Cain brought an offering of the fruit of the ground to the Lord. Abel also brought of the firstborn of his flock and of their fat. And the Lord respected Abel and his offering, but he did not respect Cain and his offering. And Cain was very angry, and his countenance fell. Now, I'm going to come back to that in a moment. We're going to talk about why, but I want to get to the question. So the Lord said to Cain, "Why are you angry, and why has your countenance fallen?" And I want to ask you the question today, why are you angry? And you might say, well, I'm not angry, Pastor, and that's fair enough. It's not a pointed question as much as it's a general question about our emotional state. And the fact that God asks, why are you angry, means a couple of things. It means that your emotions are very real and they're very much yours, and you need to own them, and you need to realize that they're not an accident. The fact that God asks why means there could be a reason why. Otherwise, he wouldn't ask why. Why are you angry means you need to get to the bottom of what's going on in your life. You need to see that that emotion is not automatic. A lot of people act like their emotions are automatic. It's the automatic response. We love to say things like, he made me so angry. And that gives all of the possession of your emotion to another person. He didn't make you angry. He facilitated an ability for you to get angry, but the anger's yours. It never belongs to anybody else. It always belongs to you. But you don't know what they did to me. Doesn't matter what they did. It matters your response to what they did. You control that. They don't control that. And so that's why God says to Cain, why are you angry? To teach the family of man, your emotions belong to you. Don't blame it on Abel. Don't blame it on your enemy. Don't blame it on a stranger. What you have is yours. I didn't say it's bad. Cain hasn't really done anything wrong yet. There's a little bit of a lack in what he's done, and we'll dig into that. But God doesn't come to Cain and say, there's a real problem, you're angry, and you need to stop it. So God is not condemning emotion. He's not condemning an emotional response. In fact, I believe the Word makes it pretty clear that there are moments when our anger is entirely justified, when our anger is exactly what we should respond, how we should respond in a situation. Because a little emotion goes a long way to enact change, to cause us to do something we wouldn't have done before because we're not emotionally detached. Have you noticed, if we're emotionally detached, we do nothing. When we're emotionally detached, we don't care. This is why we're all talking about what's going on in the world now, is because we are finally becoming emotionally attached. It's possible we're finally becoming emotionally attached to other people's pain, or emotionally attached to other people's ideology or other people's ways of thinking. As long as we're emotionally detached, we just move on. Doesn't really matter what other people are doing. I don't really care. Or we'll even maybe say, well, it doesn't affect me, and so I'm not going to get attached to that. And that's fair enough. Why would we be emotionally upset about what doesn't affect us, where we're not involved? And we should definitely be emotionally attached when it does affect us. Sometimes we get accused of being biased. Like, oh, you only care about this, but you don't care about that. As if that's a problem. That's human nature. Listen, I'm glad I'm glad you have what you have, but I don't get as emotionally attached to what you have as I do to what I have. All right? I don't get as emotionally attached to your kid as I do my kid. I mean, that doesn't mean I don't love your kid, or I don't honor them, or I don't respect them, or I don't appreciate them, but I'm not going to feel the same way about them that you feel about them, and I'm not going to ask you to feel the same way about yours that I feel about mine. Why? Because they belong to me. I have a physical, emotional, spiritual, soulish attachment, and so my emotions are going to rotate around that. So don't feel bad because you don't feel the emotion someone wants you to over an area. We feel to what we're closely attached to. So Cain needs to do some inventory. And we talked last night about how self-inventory is not a bad thing. It's not anti-grace to take self-inventory. It's anti-grace to take a self-inventory that leads you into self-righteousness, or that leads you away from your identity, or that leads you into thinking your salvation is somehow attached to what you do or what you say. Or no, all of that's in his hands. But my self-inventory might tell me where I am in life and what to do with it. And so the question, why are you angry, is so that you will know your emotions, why they exist, and that you'll be able to own them. And how many of you realize that if you know why they exist and you own them, you might be able to avoid the catastrophe coming up? Cain is about to kill his brother. He doesn't know that yet. We don't know that yet as we're reading. We know it because we've read it 1,000 times. But if you were reading this for the first time, watching this movie, you don't know Abel's about to die, but that anger's about to go to seed and turn into something sinister and dark. It's not so bad yet. It's just anger. That's right. It's just anger. But the potential for it to be way more than anger is right on the surface. In fact, it's so close that God tells Cain, if you do well, you'll be accepted. If not, sin lies at your door. And your destiny, Cain, is to rule over it. Your anger is about to cause that sin to bite you. Your destiny is to rule over it.